anniversary moment.
It's been quite an exciting year talking about anniversaries and all the things that have gone on, and we're celebrating Mark and Bernice's anniversary today at the coffee hour also. And I noticed that the title is called Christmas, which are the decorations on the tree, which I'll be getting to in just a few minutes. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask that you raise your hands and keep them up until my statement no longer applies to you, okay? How many of you plan on putting up or already have put up a Christmas tree this year? Keep your hands up. For all of those of you who have an artificial tree, put your hands down. Okay, we have a few people left. All right. For those of you who still have your hands up, do you go and cut your own tree? If you cut your own tree out in the wild, put your hand down. Okay, we have 3 hands that are still up. Look at the size of the people here today and the number of hands that are up. Thank you very much. Well, the reason I was asking that is I'm going to give you a little bit of history of Elim's Christmas tree before we get into the story of the Christmas. And I can't go back all the way, but I can go back about 40 years. And I'm going to start with the first picture. It was a picture of our fellowship club, which was used to be called the wedding ring. And the reason I know this is about 40 years ago is because right in the front row are Eric and Dee Dee. And look how young they are. And Eric is making the peace sign, and you have to realize that he and Dee Dee grew up and went to college during the hippie phrase. She's got her long hair, and he's making the peace sign. Wonderful picture to look at all those saints. Most of them are long gone, and I'm sorry to say that. But what a treasure it was for me to just look at this picture and to remember all the wonderful people that I've known in this congregation over the years. So we're going to go from that to our next picture, which was a picture of some of our people preparing to cut down a Christmas tree, because we used to do that here at Elim and cut down the Christmas tree. And the next picture shows a real important part, because without Bob Harnell and Proctor Builder Supply, we would have never been able to go out and cut down our Christmas tree. We would borrow from Proctor Builder Supply the flatbed truck, load the Christmas tree that we had cut, oftentimes from members' yards. I believe that first one was from Doug Meerman's yard. Load it onto the flatbed truck and then bring it to the church. And the next picture shows a Christmas tree, and the guys, and this tree was going to be cut down. Anchor Bakken was the one whose tree that was. And look at those guys there. Look how they're dressed, how they're warm, and the hats. And you know, if you had a chance to really get up close, you'd know every one of those guys. The next picture shows the tree taken down. And this was at, I believe, Evelyn Peterson's house. And this was in 1983, you'll notice. And on the next picture shows a picture of the fellowship club that was taken along. And all the people's names are on that picture. I don't know if you can read them all, but John Bennett is on the far left, Harlan Peterson, Jerry Coppy, Bob Harnell, Vern Meerman, Warren, thank you, Warren Sundstrom, Helgi Gustafson, and George Johnson. And then we have 2 of the Granholm girls. And to my knowledge, and if I am incorrect on this, somebody please correct me. Other than the girls, I believe George is the only one still living. George is at Wesley Residence, and he is just a delight still to visit with. So I encourage you to think about that also. Okay, the next picture shows the first picture that we have of a Christmas tree, a real tree with Christmas on it. And now the next one shows the fellowship members getting another Christmas tree, and look at those guys. I love that picture. It's just so much fun. And there's Thor on the far right. The next picture shows them arriving at the church. And I think this is just a riot. Look at them trying to get that big tree through those doors out front. This was no easy task, getting a Christmas tree, by the way, folks. You have to realize they went out, cut down the tree, got it onto a flatbed truck, loaded it off the truck, pulled it in through the door, and then somehow they had to get it in a stand and stand it upright. All of that had to happen before the next picture shows another Christmas tree with Christmas on it. So all those things had to happen before they could ever get to the Christmas. Now, being recycle people that we are, even years ago, the Christmas tree was not just thrown out, at least not here at church, because after Christmas, the tree was stripped of its branches and the cross was prepared for Lent. And then came Easter Sunday morning, and we saw a different picture. The glorious cross resurrected in all its glory with the lilies and all the beautiful plants. Without Christmas, there would be no Easter. And unfortunately, we have people that, here's my political moment, we have people that show up on Christmas and Easter. And it's a shame that they miss all these activities and all of these wonderful times in between. So as you have a chance, look back on some of these special times, and I know each of you have special times in your own lives, in your own families, where you've done special things. Too often we get so busy with the preparations of what's happening right now that we forget to look back. And that's been kind of the purpose of all of our anniversary moments this year. Now I want to focus on some of the chrismons that we've got on our Christmas tree. And John Strongatharm so graciously went and took pictures of them while I was gone on vacation, and Maureen helped him, and I appreciate both of them and their efforts. This symbol on the tree, and by the way, a chrismon is simply a monogram for Christ. That's simply what it means. It's a Christ's monogram. You think of a monogram Christmas towels or monogram towels or monogram shirt sleeves for those who are of great importance in life. And we have monograms all throughout our life, but this is a monogram to Christ. Every one of the decorations there, except for two, and I'll get into that in a moment. This first one, however, is one of my favorites because it's used throughout not only Christmas, but throughout the church year. It's seen here in the picture as ICH, but also you often see it as IHS, IHC or IHS. And those letters stand for the first letters of Christ's name in Greek. And it's especially important to me because when I was a child in Old Elim, I remember Maybelle Peterson talking to the Sunday school about symbols in the church. And I know that sometimes for the children's sermons, I've done that very thing. And I remember Maybelle talking about the IHS, and she told us what it meant. And I'm sure I promptly, quite quickly forgot. However, what she did say was that when she was a child, she thought it meant in his steps. And I thought, what a beautiful interpretation. It's Christ, but she thought, and it's always stuck with me, the IHS was in his steps. And so that's always been a special memory of mine, and I wanted to share it with you today. Our second chrism that you're going to be seeing is a picture of a fish. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, this was an ancient symbol for Christians and for Christianity. We still see it today, don't we, on backs of cars and in different places, the shape of the fish. It also reminds me of the feeding of the 5,000, where Christ took 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed 5,000 people. So this one has many memories as well. Our next picture shows the globe, which stands for the world, and the cross, where cross of Christ united the world. And I think that is such a beautiful illustration. The next one refers to Christ as the shepherd of the sheep. And this reminds me also of Old Elim with the picture of Jesus with all the sheep on the left-hand side of the church in the great big stained glass window. But hanging down from that shepherd's crook are 2 symbols. One is the Alpha and the other is the Omega, being that Christ is the beginning and the end of all things. Our next slide shows the crown, the kingship of Jesus. And all of these chrismons, by the way, were made by ladies in this church, carefully beaded on wire and bent and made into these beautiful chrismons. And when we decorate the trees every year, we have to take them out, and they're in trays to keep them safe and to keep them protected, because they're very fragile, as you can well imagine. Our next picture shows the triune God, the sign of a triangle, the triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Encircled with that are the three, also can be used for that, but it also reminds me of the eternal circle, the eternal value, and the eternal love of Christ in our lives and in our world. And so the next picture is one of the Jerusalem cross. And this Jerusalem cross is made up of 4 tau crosses, which are the crosses that look like T's all put together, made into a large cross. And then there's one missing, but the 4 smaller crosses have several meanings that I was able to find. And one of them represents the 4 corners of the world, because God told us to go out into the world and spread the gospel. And it also sometimes is referred to as the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And before we get to our final picture, I just wanted to say a word about our Christmas tree here. This is our second artificial tree. Our first artificial tree, you saw in the picture, each individual branch had to be stuck in, and some of you probably had those in your homes as well. This one now is a little easier to decorate. It comes in 3 or 4 sections, and they just kind of fold out, and then you have to fluff it up. Isn't that your word, Maureen, fluffing it? Maureen likes to fluff the tree. And then the chrismons are put on. We have 2 other ornaments on the tree. We have a red one and a blue one. And these are there because when Trevor Essen, our youth and family ministry person, was a young man in this church, he thought the tree was boring with just the white. He wasn't quite sure that he knew what chrismons were, but he understood red and blue. So he put the red and blue Christmas balls on the tree, and they're still put on the tree every year since then. So even though Trevor isn't here today because he's at his military requirement for the month, he is here in presence with the Christmas tree and the chrismons and his red and blue ornaments. The last chrismon I want to show you today is the rose on the star. And the rose symbols the nativity of Christ. And it also is symbolic of Mary, the purity of Mary, the mother of our Lord. So rather than just always sitting in your pew when you come to church, it might be kind of interesting for you to come up and take a look at the Christmas tree, either before or after worship service, and take a look at some of these beautiful chrismons. I've just done a few of the many that are up there, but I wanted you to have a little greater appreciation for the symbolic ornaments that we have on our tree and the different explanations of Christ in our world, because we see these all over, and more churches are using chrismons. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you've learned something this morning. And remember, IHS in his steps.